All right, just to give you an idea of what the United States was like at the end of the Civil War, there were no indoor lights at all, and it took about 3 weeks for mail to go from New York to LA. It was a real different time, and this is a time, the business era of America, where the growth of factories happened, was also a time of great innovation. In terms of energy, this is a time where oil, which is a predominant form of energy today, that and coal, were just beginning to be used. It was a very, very scarce fuel source. They didn't use it very much. It was originally found in Pennsylvania, and actually, I know we think of places like Texas and Alaska as large oil fields today, but Pennsylvania, even Indiana, had oil fields back then. Thomas Edison at this time invented the incandescent light bulb, which also led him to invent the system of delivering electricity to homes and to businesses through wires on telephone poles. And the power stations that Thomas Edison created were powered by coal. And in Indiana, that's how we still get our power. If you ever look by the railroad tracks that run by the zoo downtown, there are usually coal trains backed up to dump them into the big power station, which is kind of next to Victory Field downtown. It also was cheap. It was cheap power because coal was relatively cheap to get out of the ground and deliver, and it was cheap because they were delivering such huge amounts of electricity to so many people that it drove the price of electricity down, which was good for consumers and really good for business. In terms of communication, you had the telegraph, which was invented then, which is a series of beeps in a pattern. It was an electrical impulse over a wire that sounds like a beep when it arrives on the other end. It is a huge leap forward to having to send letters by horseback or by rail. Now you can run one wire across a city, across a state, across the nation, and within seconds you can get through a series of codes called the Morse code. You can get a news of what happened. Like for instance, when the Great San Francisco Fire happened, they knew about it in New York the day it happened. Otherwise, it would have taken 2 weeks to find that news on the East Coast. So it was a huge deal back then. The other big invention was, of course, the telephone. Telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell, which I assume you guys have all heard of that guy. Um, he had to string a series of wires just like Edison did. And the thing about the Alexander Graham Bell was it was wire to wire communication. You pick up one phone, and the only person you could call was on the other end of that wire. They had to create a series of switchboard operators to connect them to different homes and stuff, which, if you ask me about in class, I'll explain to you how that worked. Railroads were great. The Transcontinental Railroad, which is on your vocab list, was invented. That railroad connected the east and west coasts. It was a major milestone because it went through two different mountain ranges and across the desert. A lot of people didn't think it could ever get done, but as you can see in the lower right hand, that picture is of the final rail spike going in the railroad tracks to connect the two rail lines. Um, and with that, people began to travel by rail in very comfortable cars and also in second class cars, which were just seats. But you could buy a cheap ticket to go from New York to LA, whereas in the past you would have had to get on a stagecoach and ride across the United States and go through all the perils of that. Here's why railroads are important. They were fast and it was cheap because you could load so many things on the railroads. It was also a quick way to spread your markets. There were more places. If you owned a hat store in New York, you could now sell your hats pretty much anywhere that the railroad reached. It was a way to help the country's growth. Now people could travel easier, and they could also move easier if they wanted to move from one side of the country to another. And you could also move. You could visit your family if you did move away. And it was the first way to manage large, complex companies. All right, this is the first video, and we'll do one more and be done.